Within the consciousness of each and every one of us resides the eternal and sacred soul. By awakening to our soul and striving to live in alignment with our soul's purpose, we can live extraordinary lives beyond conditioned limitations, to pursue a life of healing, intentionality, and connection. Join us, your co-hosts, me, Katrina Slade, and Jennifer Hellwing, as we explore and discuss this path of living in alignment with the sacred soul. In this podcast, we endeavor to inspire and empower you through individual and collective healing of the feminine. We are here to honor our oneness, celebrate authenticity, and deepen our connection to our beautiful planet Earth. This is the Sacred Soul Podcast. Hi, I'm Katrina Slade.
And I'm Jennifer Hellwing.
In this episode, we're going to discuss the divine feminine. So we'll talk about what it is, our experiences with this energy, and we're going to share some recommendations for you to connect more with your divine feminine energy within you. So Jen, can you start us off by explaining what the divine feminine is?
Yes, I can. So we can let's just start by breaking it up, divine and feminine. So the divine is the purity, the pure expression of something. And now the feminine is part of this idea of duality where we've got, the yin yang, or like the masculine and the feminine. So in the world that we live in, we do experience everything from this lens of light and shadow and yin and yang and day and night and all these things. So the feminine would be associated with the nighttime, the yin. So the divine feminine is the pure expression of feminine energy. All beings have a mixture of divine feminine and divine masculine within them. But particularly if you strongly identify as feminine or as a woman, you have that as your primary essence. So the divine feminine within us would be like a pure expression of this feminine energy. So creativity, birth, receptivity, openness, gentleness, love, compassion. And then there's also the side that's a little bit darker, like not darker as in bad, but darker like the womb, where we have infinite possibility, we have insight, we have intuition, we have wisdom, we have the moon, the nighttime. And so those things are also associated with the divine feminine.
I really like this symbol of the yin yang, although I think it's pronounced yin yang, but when I say yang, it sounds wrong to me. I like that symbol because it's like the black and the white are just symbolizing, the feminine and masculine, and it's like they're whole. When they're together, it's a whole, exactly. Right? So it's like people who identify as more male or more female, we all have both within us, but it's at different ratios, I guess. If I'm thinking of the symbol of like the circle with like the yin yang symbol in it, maybe some people have more than the other.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just that we have different percentages or ratios of these energies, but it's also that we have very unique expressions of these energies. And so instead of thinking of it as divine feminine, you can almost think of it as human feminine, right? So the human feminine is going to be very different, and it's going to express itself through these lenses of who we are as people. And so it can look, yes, it can look like light and compassion and nourishment and loving kindness, but it can also look like deep wisdom and depth and quietness and retreat and just this incredible depth, even destruction, letting go. It's all of those things and more. So it's really interesting.
So I really like the Hindu goddess Kali. Do you know Kali?
Yes.
So she's like an expression of the divine feminine, but she's like fierce and she's like the destroyer. Like she'll burn away and destroy like all that needs to go for your transformation, to like acts to, I don't know how to explain it very well, but I really like that version of the divine feminine too. So is there a way you could kind of explain how those are both part of the divine feminine?
Yeah, so So what you're describing is the transition from the masculine to the feminine. So that looks like destruction because we're going from what is to the infinite possibility so we can have life and renewal and newness. And so the transition, like if you look at the seasons, summertime is divine masculine in its fullest and wintertime is divine feminine in its fullest because the divine feminine expresses through winter into spring. And the divine feminine also pulls summer into fall. So the divine feminine is like this rotation energy, as well as the nothingness of winter, the infinite possibility of winter. And then the divine masculine is everything that is. So when you look at the idea of destruction, you can see it as autumn. It's the death, the dying.
The shedding the leaves, all of that.
Yeah, the shedding, the letting go, right? To come into that place where we can have winter, the womb, insight, wisdom, like the darkness, that kind of energy, and then it brings us into life and birth and healing and newness and that type of stuff. So yeah,
I like how you connected that with the seasons because it makes a lot of sense to me. Like if you think of the winter, we can't see it, but inside the trees, they're like preparing for spring. And so all of a sudden, when spring comes, like there's one day when all the little buds pop out from the trees, like for the new leaves. And you're like, wow, where did those come from? Well, the whole winter, they've been like preparing for it.
Exactly. It's really hard to separate them because they're so interwoven in our world. In order for spring to happen, like you need the divine masculine, which is the sun. You need the sun to come and sort of start warming things and kind of bringing new light and some new energy for the feminine to fully express itself as beauty and sensuality and all these wonderful things that are associated with spring. So they're very interwoven. It's as we grow into summer, the divine masculine is becoming dominant. And then as we fall into winter, the divine feminine is becoming dominant. So it's this little dance that's kind of done through the seasons, so we can observe that in the natural world.
And I've always heard the divine masculine sort of described like outward energy, like production, doing, going, like that. And then the divine feminine as like inward energy, right? Like receptivity, receiving, surrender. Yeah. And that's very interesting to me because I think most of us are conditioned to live in the masculine energy.
Yeah, exactly. So for a long time, our society was very masculine dominant, where if you wanted to have any power or agency, you had to either be a man or you had to buy into that masculine energy. And so we have like the women's rights movement and all that stuff that was very necessary. But what it did is it allowed us to have the freedom of choice as to how we want to express our femininity, right? So I wanted to ask you, Katrina, what do you feel like your unique expression of the divine feminine is?
I have realized over the last few years that I have a pretty deep feminine wound. And so that has manifested itself in like a resistance to a lot of feminine things and like living my life in a feminine way. And I didn't realize it until recently.
Okay,
so for me, like I'm just now starting to get into the divine feminine more, like intentionally, and to try and restructure the way I live my life so it's not so masculine, like go, go, go. I have to be productive all the time, go, 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 and not like ignoring my cycles, ignoring my inner like cycles that my energy levels and my hormones are changing, but I kept going, going, going. So now I'm becoming more conscious and aware of my own needs and like my cycles, and I'm just beginning, so I'm not like an expert yet on like you do cycle syncing and like living cyclically with your cycle.
I do, and that should be another episode, like living cyclically, because I think it's such a wonderful thing. But it sounds like you went through this process of you had maybe become in a lot of ways what you felt like you had to be to survive in the world and to get by. And so it was really freeing for you to let go of some of those things and come home to your own unique expression of the divine feminine.
Yes, it's very freeing, but it also hurts, like you have to do a lot of shadow work and be like, well, why do
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think this? Like, why do I think I have to be so successful and productive all the time? It's exhausting and it leads to burnout. And
yeah,
I think and I think that happens to a lot of people, even men, even people who identify as male, because we just taught to value like the things that capitalist society values.
yeah. I mean, we could talk about the economy.
Yeah.
So the economy favors production and
Hmm.
consumerism,
Hmm.
which is, evidently killing the planet. But it's it's also representative of this loss of valuing the feminine.
Hmm.
Like that's exactly what our society represents, is that we don't value the feminine. We only value
Exactly.
the masculine.
Exactly. And we only value the feminine if it's sexy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up feeling that like I had to be beautiful and I had to be docile and I had to be, all these things that we're taught to be, but that goes so against my inner soul, I guess. Like I'm
Mm.
not a docile person and I'm just not I don't want to live to make men happy. I want to live to make me happy. So, and to
Exactly.
like, live in alignment with my true essence and my true nature. So, I've gone through a big unbecoming. Did we talk about unbecoming in the last episode?
We did. Yeah.
I'm still going through it right now, but
So am I. Yeah.
I think we're lucky that we're doing it now because so many people live their lives into their 40s and 50s and later because they've been taught this is how the world is and this is how you should be. And
Yeah.
they don't realize until later. And so I feel really grateful that I'm going through this now in my 30s,
Yeah.
becoming the person that I am meant to be and not like I'm shedding all the conditioning and all of the wounding. Also, I wanted to mention that most of us are carrying ancestral wounding, specifically from the feminine line, like female,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
all of the pain and oppression and abuse and all of the hardships all of our female ancestors have endured. Like we still carry that in our wombs, unless, maybe some more than others, but I do. So I've had to learn a lot about becoming aware of that and trying to release that and heal that for me and all my ancestors and my future lineage that's in the future.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier that I really appreciated, was how you explained how you had to find your own relationship to your own sexuality and your own expression of the feminine.
mhm,
What femininity can be for all of us is such a spectrum. And so for some women, it can be like very sexual, and for others it can look like being a nun. But those are both a divine feminine. So I just want to like say that, because we have to find our own way of what feels the most empowering to us and what feels feminine to us. That looks really different for a lot of women.
yeah. And one thing that I've been really aware of lately for me is what's triggering to me,
Mm-hmm.
because like I get triggered when I see women who are like overtly sexual. And I'm like, how can they do that? you know, because I've always been taught like, well, I've been taught two things that are opposites. You shouldn't be empowered sexually because you're a girl, and you should be beautiful and sexy for men. So it's like so confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. I totally agree with you, and I can relate to that. I've gone through so many phases in my life. I've gone through phases of being like very, very sexual, and then I've gone through phases of being totally covering myself completely, and just so it's interesting. And I found a good balance now, but I had sometimes we have to explore the different polarities to kind of find out where
Mhm.
we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention, if you're triggered by something, like my example was women who are overtly sexually empowered, um, that's telling you something about your wounding, right? It's not about them. it's about you. And so I've sort of realized that, and I've been doing a lot of my own healing and discovering with my relationship to, sensuality and my sexuality and all of that. So,
Yeah. Do you want to share any more about your story and like finding your own version of sexuality or your expression of that as a woman?
I'm still doing it. I'm still figuring that out. But let's just say I've been really struggling my whole sexual life to like receive pleasure. Like it's hard for me to do that.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely a wounding. It's not, you're not naturally like that, right? Like it's not your pure
Yeah.
essence to be struggling to receive pleasure. So that's just something I've been working on.
Exactly. Like I have a lot of sexual trauma, and it has been a journey for me to learn how to feel safe in my body again, because there was so many times where I almost like didn't trust myself. I like almost saw my own sexual energy as this enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely relate to some of what you're sharing. Yeah.
I I I always felt that it was shameful to have sexual, urges or desires or have a sensual side at all. Like I was just always taught
Yeah,
either
exactly.
nothing or that it's shameful. So like how is that going to manifest as an adult? Obviously, it's going to give you some blocks and some wounds that you have to heal. And I think a lot of women have that. And what you just shared, Jen, that's really brave of you to share about your history with sexual trauma. And I think a lot of people listening can relate to that. Thank you for sharing that. And just like people listening, our listeners, just know that it doesn't always have to be that way. Like you can, when you're ready, when it's the right time, you can begin to heal that relationship with you and your sensuality and your divine
Yeah.
feminine.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a journey, right? Like it's really a journey. We don't have to force it or think, oh, look at all these things that are wrong with me, because it's not your fault. Like it's not your fault. Like Katrina was saying too, that intergenerational trauma and even the
Mm,
masculine, like while we're talking about the masculine, we've got the divine masculine and then we've got the wounded masculine.
toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and the world has a lot of that. And that is a cycle. Men in our society have that trauma or that like conditioning of being wounded is like passed down through them
Yes.
too.
Yes.
We have to work together to heal this.
Yeah.
Because when the feminine is wounded, so is the masculine, and we all kind of wound each other, and it just creates this awful cycle. So the healing is for us together. We've got to work together.
Do you think you could explain to the listeners, like, how might it feel for somebody who has a healthy relationship with their divine feminine and also like somebody who's like super disconnected or might have a wounded or like a blocked divine feminine relationship?
Yeah. I think it's so because I think it's so different for every person. But I can share like my personal experience just because some people might relate to it. But of course, like this is going to look different for everyone. Um, what I would talk about first is just this idea that making peace with even being feminine, right? So, like, whatever that is in your society or even your own beliefs about what it means to be a woman, making peace with that and finding the parts, like Katrina was saying, finding the things that trigger you and that you feel resistance to, and then working through those things. So, when you're in alignment with your divine feminine, it feels very much like just being at peace with being a
Mm-hmm.
woman.
And feeling joy even when you're connected to your femininity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Joy is the sacral, and our womb represents creativity and it represents joy and just the joyful expression. So, if you're in that, like if you're able to be creative and have a joyful expression and even experience like sensual pleasures from the world and experience beauty and see beauty in everything and everyone, that would be someone who is very aligned with the divine feminine. So, for me, just going back, as a young woman, a young adult, it has been a journey for me through like religious conditioning and whatnot. Worked through that, became hypersexual, was very much in my sexual power, experienced sexual trauma, closed myself off completely. I went 2 years of my life without shaving at all and without wearing a bra.
Wow.
I didn't want to make myself look beautiful because I had this idea that that made me vulnerable.
Yeah. Or weak. Yeah.
Yeah, so I spent lots of years of my life totally resisting my femininity. I was wearing like clothes that were covering and hiding my body.
Yeah.
I wanted to hide my body. I wanted to have hair everywhere. And I don't want to say that like hair isn't beautiful. It is actually. And so it was really freeing for me to learn to love my body in its natural state. That was super freeing for me. But then I came to a point afterwards where I was like, you know what? My beauty is also my power, and my ability to feel beautiful is my power. And so what feels beautiful to you, whatever that is your power.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to come back and start exploring that.
Yeah.
I do wear a lot of flowy silk clothing, and like I do love wearing flowy kind of hippie skirts and like, you know, lots of jewelry and gemstones and stuff. So that's my feminine expression. So it's a little different, but we have to find that what feels good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I want to slip something in that I wrote. This is something that I wrote that came to me in meditation in relation to how the divine masculine and divine feminine would show up in our world in a healed way. So the energy of the divine masculine honors, protects, and uplifts the goodness of the world, while the divine feminine nourishes, heals, and brings love into the darkness. Things fall apart when the masculine only honors, protects, and uplifts himself, and when the feminine is too wounded to nourish, heal, or love herself.
That's so good.
So that's the journey to healing. The divine masculine needs to learn their role is to protect the softness, to uplift the weak, to, you know, uplift the weak and the marginalized and lift them up. And like, I don't just mean the feminine, but I mean all of the pain and suffering in the world. The divine masculine, their job is to protect those people, to honor the goodness and protect the goodness. The divine feminine can then feel safe enough to feel love for herself. And when the feminine can love herself, we can spill our love into the places where love is needed. So that's the cycle of healing. And of course, we live in a world that is wounded, and so we don't have that proper balance. But we can work towards it. We can work towards it together.
Yes, that's amazing. That explains it. It sums it up so concisely and like truthfully and beautifully. I love that. Our listeners might be curious to know how they can have a deeper connection with their divine feminine or like begin healing their divine feminine. So, Jenn, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, Katrina, I want to start with something that you brought up because I think it's so helpful. Pay attention to your triggers. Pay attention to what makes you uncomfortable, especially in relation to other women, motherhood, judgment.
Just how you're judging others, other women.
Yeah. A judgmental mind is not in its divine feminine because the feminine is accepting and open. So being aware of your own judgments, of yourself and of others, and then your creativity, your relationship to creativity and authentic expression. So using your voice, but in a gentle and loving way that is truthful to you. So it's speaking your truth from a place that is at peace with itself, if that makes sense. So when we're able to feel at peace with ourselves and we've worked through our wounding and then we use our voice to tell our truths, that's really, really beautiful and very activating for the divine feminine.
I also want to jump in and say, in terms of creativity, there's that, which is extremely valuable. And there's like the playful side that's just like being creative for fun.
Yes,
you know, like
definitely.
Whatever that looks like, dancing, cooking, singing. Everyone's like, oh, I'm not an artist because I'm an artist. And so people are always like, oh, I can never do what you do. And I'm like, it's just connecting to something you enjoy that involves creation, and it's like fun, so that's another way of like connecting to the divine feminine with the creativity.
I love that you said that, because you're right. So many people don't identify as artists, which I think is actually really sad, because if you look at children, all children are creative. All children think that they're artists, but we lose that along the way.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I used to be an art teacher, and I could tell in my students, elementary school age students, full of joy and zest for art, for creation. And then around 12 or 13, they start getting so self-conscious. And then they lose it, and it's really sad.
The judgmental mind comes in, right?
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah. So first of all, start identifying as a creative person. Like, even if you're not doing art, just start identifying as that. I'm creative. I'm a creative person. It might not look like art. It might look like dance. It might look like singing. It might look like just
decorating.
Yeah, it can look like anything, even like
cooking.
Yeah, cooking is very creative. Absolutely. Cooking is, it's very creative. But it's also sensual, right? Like being in touch with our senses. So like our sense of smell and taste and touch and like all those beautiful things. Through cooking, you can kind of feel that, and through food. And it's really wonderful for connecting with that energy.
Yeah.
I have an activity that you can try if you're listening.
Oh, I want to know.
The divine feminine it's very much associated with beauty. Not conventional beauty or like what beauty should be, but the ability to see beauty in everything. So, and this is an activity that I actually did for myself when I was trying to get more in touch with my divine feminine. So what I invite you to try is go and sit somewhere in nature and bring a journal and describe the scene, like describe everything you're seeing as if it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Describe the scene as if maybe you're like from the moon or something and you've never seen Earth and you're there for the first time. Just notice every single detail and just describe it like it was the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen. Describe it to somebody who has never seen Earth before.
That's amazing.
And that will help you. Yeah, that will help you get in touch with that beauty lens. And then when you've done that exercise, if you are brave enough, do the same exercise looking into a mirror.
Ooh, oh my gosh.
And it's hard. It is hard. But it can be really, really interesting. And really
I want to do that.
To try it out.
I need to do more. Yeah, the nature would be easier, but I need to do more of the like mirror stuff, because like whenever I go on walks, like I just love admiring the nature. Like it's so fun for me to like get into that appreciation feeling and like love. I guess you're just connecting to love actually. But the mirror, like doing that for yourself, like I feel resistance to that.
Oh yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I love that. I hope the listeners might be open to trying that.
Yeah, and another thing you can try is to just ask yourself questions about what beliefs you have about what it means to be a woman, and really examine where those things came from your family, from society, and then go through that list and put your hand on your heart and actually feel into which of these things do I love and connect with, and which of them are not for me, that I am like okay with letting go of, right? So you can do that and kind of go through that and just have fun creating and expressing your own version of what is feminine, what's beautiful to you. It's so individual. So
yeah.
So those are my recommendations. But Katrina, I know that you have a bunch of great ideas too. So can you share some of yours?
Well, my ideas are specifically coming from my lens right now, where I'm in deep healing mode from my divine feminine, and I call it the feminine wound. I don't know if we mentioned the feminine wound specifically yet, but I don't know why, but it's like coming up right now for me, and I really need to heal it. Otherwise, I'm going to get I'm going to have more medical problems that I've had recently. In my womb space. So specifically, the things I've been doing that seem to be helping me, I'll just share, in case it resonates with somebody else. I've been told that I need to connect with my body more. It also involves grounding, like grounding into the earth and like doing some movement. And for like a week, I was like trying to do like dancing, like alone by myself, but it didn't resonate with me. So instead, I've been like holding my womb space, and like when I'm meditating, or I guess just like into getting more like loving energy into my womb. and and also like in terms of the body, I've been noticing my cycle more, paying attention to, I'm still not like that good at it, but I've been paying attention to what phase of my cycle am I in, and like, like luteal phase. I'm in the luteal phase is right before the menstrual phase, right? Yeah.
Same.
Oh,
Did you know that that's supposed to be like the phase of the wild woman?
no.
It's supposed to be the phase where we start to get in touch with like our anger and our like primal feminine, like the protective mother that's like roar.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, going a little wild.
I like that.
Yeah.
We all need that a little, like every now and then. We need to
Mhm.
access that side of ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I've been not very good about that, but I'm trying to like plan like my schedule based on what phase I'm in, and um, giving myself rest when I need rest, especially that like when my body feels like it needs rest. I'm really trying to honor that and not feel
Mhm.
bad and guilty about needing rest.
Yeah. Yes, that's so important. And that's like, that plays into the feminine wounding you were talking about earlier about feeling like guilt from not being productive.
Oh my God. I used to feel like burning guilt if I wasn't
Wow.
productive like every second of the day. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
listening can relate to that. So, like, isn't that awful living
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
horrible. How can you be joyful if
Ugh,
you're living like that? Where's the space to just enjoy?
no, like, it's hard to access pleasure. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to feel like you're in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
It's so hard when you're living like that, when you're living more in the masculine, the wounded, even like the
Yeah, the
wounded
wounded
masculine,
masculine.
like
Yeah.
it's so hard.
Yeah.
So, something else I've been really doing is I'm actually seeking a lot of help in my healing, because I had a crisis recently, and I discussed it previously, so I won't get into it now, but I had a health crisis where I had so much pain in my womb. And so I needed to like heal for real. So I've been seeing a therapist. I'm talking to her about these things. I've also done some energy healing on myself, and I've reached out to an emotion code practitioner. It's just a form of healing and like clearing energy. And I've received help from some sessions from her.
It's so important to not have to do it alone.
Yeah, because it's overwhelming. Like I've been aware that I have a feminine wound that I need to heal for a long time, but I'm like, well, I don't know how to heal it. And now I'm like, oh, I really need to heal it because I'm having a health crisis because it's manifesting as dis-ease.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I've experienced that too. For me, it was from my sexual trauma. I had literal pain and I
Oh,
went to doctors and they were like, "Oh, there's nothing like wrong with you. You're
hmm.
fine." And I went for it. I had like scans done and all these things and I was like, "Wow, okay, this has got to be energy." And it was frustrating because I knew that, like I knew that it was energy and I knew that it was from my sexual trauma, but just knowing that wasn't enough to heal it. It actually took me almost 7 years.
You were in pain for 7 years?
Yeah.
Oh, oh my God. I'm so glad that you finally have done healing for that. That's awful.
And looking back, I wish I had gotten more help. Um, but it was hard to just like try to, it just needed time. It just needed time. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you're not ready for healing. Like I've been aware of my I don't want to call it my wound, but I've been aware of the feminine wound within me for a while. And I just didn't know what to do. So I just
Yeah.
ignored
Yeah.
it, and then it manifested as like
Yeah.
dis-ease,
Yeah.
illness in my body. And I guess now I'm ready. Honestly, I think it manifested when it did, because it's like now
Yeah.
is when you're ready to heal. I wasn't ready earlier, but now I was ready to heal. And so for you, in your experience, maybe you weren't ready um, for those years.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was like I had to accept it and just let go of my obsession with trying to force myself to heal.
Yeah.
Just that like forcing energy is the opposite of the divine feminine. So I had to let go, and I had to be like, look, this is just what happened and this is what my body is doing. And I just tried to love my body and just be patient with my body and be gentle with my body, and that was probably when the healing started to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just, in the past, was just angry at my body.
Oh my God. I still am sometimes, I I bet you 80% of the people listening to
Yeah,
this can
yeah,
relate. I think women are always taught to like not honor their bodies and to like force their bodies to do things that, you know, or to disapprove or to have shame and all that. So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
we can all relate. So another thing I wanted to mention is if you're looking to heal some feminine wounding within you, or if you want to heal the divine feminine within you, it's always good to like seek out role models. And what I mean by that is like people who are sort of embodying
mm-hmm.
healed divine feminine. So like people you follow on social media, or like I love to do reading and learning about these topics. So I've done a lot of like reading, and I gravitate towards authors who seem to be expressing like the
Yeah,
healed
yeah,
feminine energy. And so I would say just whatever resonates with you, like seek it out and surround yourself with it so you can see examples of people who are like fully embodied in their divine feminine, and who are, not
yeah,
living in their shadow, triggered,
yeah,
wounded self, but they're fully, like, I use the word role model because that's what I'm seeking out. Like I want to find women who can show me what's possible based on like how they're living, and it's really inspiring.
yeah. I love that, exactly. And also with the mother wound, if you have a wounded relationship with your mother, you have a wounded relationship with a feminine. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the time we need to seek out women who can be like elders to us too, like women that are healthy that can actually just listen to us when we're talking, or just like be kind of like you said, like a role model to us, somebody that's willing to kind of guide us and inspire us and kind of be there for us. And that can look like lots of different things.
Yeah.
For me, one of those people is my yoga teacher, and she teaches a lot about honoring our bodies and
Mhm.
being in that cyclical kind of life, like a lot of those things that she's teaching me about taking rest when you need to, and just being able to like work hard when you feel good and then rest really, really indulgently when you need to, and just kind of going back and
Mhm.
forth between that. Do
Yeah.
you have any
Yeah.
favorite books or people that you look up to or that you see like that?
I do. I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but I love the work by Tosha Silver. Her whole platform is about letting the divine take the lead. She's all about like living from surrender, and it's very much feminine. It's very much finding happiness and joy and pleasure in surrender. It's surrender sounds so like abstract. It sounds so like, oh, surrender. So now I'm like so passive and I have no control over my life. It's not really like that. Like she teaches, I guess I'd say an empowered way of living in the divine feminine.
Surrender actually can be really empowering. Have you found that?
Hmm. Yeah, because you're not, yeah, because you're not a slave to like what your desires are based on like what capitalist patriarchal society tells you you should want, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, oh, what are your goals in life? Or like, what do you want in life? And I actually felt so in my power when I said, I want nothing. I have all the love, all the joy within me, and everything else is a bonus. Like, that was really powerful for me to say that. And in
Wow.
the past, I felt like I'm supposed to have this list. And so it was freeing for me personally to be able to say, no, I'm good.
Hmm. I'm so grateful for what I have. So I can kind of like, I don't think I don't think I'm living in a place of scarcity and lack just because I want more for my life or I want certain things. But I'm like, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm so grateful for what I have. What if I could do this with my life? It's like inspiring. But if you're coming from a place of lack, then it's really disempowering. So I sometimes I catch myself in that. Like obviously I'm human. I catch myself from like desiring things from a place of lack, and then I realize it, and then I can switch my mindset, and just living in gratitude is very empowering. So if you're like, for you, if you're grateful for everything you have, your life now is great. And also for me, like I'm grateful for what I have and for what could be, in the
Mm,
future. So
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to jump into our final topic. We're going to talk about the path of spirituality through the lens of the divine feminine. And Katrina, you were like already leading us perfectly into that. So, so okay, we wanted to mention that intuition is the divine feminine. And so we want to talk about intuition and our own experiences with opening up our intuition and how that has helped us come home to our divine feminine.
Yeah. Okay. So before I started developing my intuition, before I realized that we are intuitive beings and we can access our intuition and that I have intuition, I was living more in my masculine. And so I think it's not a coincidence that my spiritual awakening and my like intuition development has been happening simultaneously to me like shedding the like conditioning. It's like they happened at the same time, and I'm only realizing that right now as I'm speaking. um
Yeah, it's not a coincidence.
no,
Exactly.
because the more you deepen your intuition, the more in the feminine you're becoming, and also the
Yes.
more you're aware of your true self, like the core of yourself, like your soul. And you kind of are able to shed and release all the limiting conditioning that you've grown up with. Yeah, I think having a connection to my intuition is so healing, even.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it at the
Yeah.
time when I was beginning to start that journey of intuition development, but it is very healing, don't you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's coming back to our power. Like our feminine power is that intuition and that ability to see possibilities and to see connections and to see the symbolic language around us in the world. And just seeing things through that lens is very much, both a path of spirituality and a path of the divine feminine. So they totally are parallel to each other. For me, learning to be quiet with myself and connect with myself and just trust what I'm feeling and what I'm being told, following like what I knew I needed to be doing with my life specifically. So that and that it was hard. It was hard to learn to listen, um, because we kind of sometimes think we know better, or we might get these downloads and we're like, yeah, okay, but not yet, or yeah, okay, but I'm going to do that while I'm also going to keep doing this other thing, right? So we can kind of we kind of try to like yes and a little bit to our
Yeah.
intuition, and it just needs to be yes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me of what you were saying about trust. I feel like trust is a very feminine thing.
Oh my gosh, we could talk about that because the divine feminine has to feel safe to be in full expression. That's one of the main things is like
Yeah.
we have to feel safe. So we have to have both trust and faith in order to fully express our divine feminine. So of course, when we talked about the feminine wound and all this stuff, a lot of that creates a feeling like I'm not safe in my life, I'm not safe in this body, I'm not safe in the world, and that blocks a lot of our freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. And also trusting your intuition, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's also
Yeah.
feeling safe. Like when you feel an intuitive hit or an intuitive download, I used to ignore it, like you were saying, because it's like, well, that's just my thought. I don't actually trust myself. But actually, I've learned through the course of my intuition development, that's the most truth, like
Yeah.
the first like intuitive hit. And you can kind of learn what it feels like in your body. Like for me, when I feel something very, very true, I don't know why, but my throat kind of expands and opens.
Oh,
And so
beautiful.
I feel the opposite when something is not. So my throat constricts and gets tight.
I love that you brought that up because that's the physical presence of intuition, and it's so feminine because it's us learning to trust our bodies too. So
Yeah.
when we can trust our bodies and our intuition, we are so powerful.
Yes,
Like that is powerful stuff.
it is. It's kind of magical, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it's like I feel a yes in my chest, like
Mm-hmm.
in my heart, and it's kind of just like above my heart, so sort of just below my collarbone. It feels like more expansion there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like no or something is wrong. I feel like my stomach just goes and just like clenches up really tight. So that's how I feel it in my body.
It's funny because it's both like expansion for yes and contraction
Mm-hmm.
and constricting for no. Like, so if
Mm-hmm.
you're like, as a listener, if you already know how your body responds when it feels a yes or when it feels a no, that's great. But if you don't already know, start paying attention to, like, like for example, am I meant to, like, if you're going to have a big purchase and you're like, oh, I'm nervous, I don't know if I should do this or not, you can ask, like, is this for my highest good? And then if you feel a constriction, that might be a signal to you that that's no. Or if it's an expansion somewhere in your body, that might be a signal that it means yes. And you can learn how to recognize that.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. I have many of my clients go through that process of trying to learn to connect with that physical presence of intuition. And it's really hard. Like
Mm,
it for a lot of people it's really hard and it takes time. So
yeah,
give yourself a lot of time to
yeah,
figure that out. Yeah.
yeah. The worst thing to do would be to beat yourself up every time you're trying to connect in your divine feminine or your intuition, because
Yeah.
that's it's just what we're trained to do, but it's not going to help you in any way. So just give yourself grace and love and just do your best. And that's what we're all doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to finish off today, I just want to bring our awareness back to the idea that we are sacred, that our bodies are sacred, that who we are is sacred, that our lives are sacred, and just inviting you to bring that sacredness back into your life is very helpful to connect with your divine feminine. So, Katrina and I are going to close off by just reclaiming our sacredness. So, I invite you to try this exercise if you're listening. So, I want you to just say, something that you want to bring sacredness back to. So for me, it's going to be my body is sacred and my creative energy is sacred.
That's so beautiful. I'm going to say my femininity is sacred and my sensuality is sacred.
I love that. Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're interested in learning more or connecting more with some of the themes we've discussed, we invite you to join us in our sisterhood containers. They're like women's circles, but they go so much deeper, and it's going to be so amazing to connect with each other. So we invite you to find out more at our Instagram, you can find us at Sacred Soul Healing Co. And if you want to connect more with me and learn more about what I offer, you can find me on Instagram, Katrina Slade Artist Intuitive, or katrinaslade.com.
And if you're interested in finding out more about me and how we can work together, I empower people to heal their own wounds and rise into their soul's true calling. You can find me at moonpathwellness.com or at Wellness with Jenn on Instagram. Thanks for listening.